What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassity. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back, everyone. It's all where you come for what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? Don't forget to follow, subscribe, share, like, comment. That just helps the show. I so appreciate it. Wow, I have a guest that I have been so excited to interview. And I believe if you looked it up, that David Israel would own the phrase, turning lemons into lemonade. I think he might own that one. He's turning adversity into opportunity. This guy owns it. David Israel is an uber successful serial entrepreneur. The guy's owned a nightclub, a jewelry store, a chain of upscale pawn shops, a maintenance company. David went through a riveting nightmare that had him eventually serving a 5-year prison sentence. Then what'd he do? Then what would you do if you had to go serve a 5 years? Well, David founded Pop Gourmet Foods, whose idea originated by what inmates were doing, creating their popcorn, making their popcorn taste good in prison. This company took over the snack industry by a storm, nationally, internationally. And then 2017, David did it again by creating the wildly popular company, Good Planet Foods, to address the demand for people who want to eat better, healthier, environmentally friendly products. I can't wait to jump into all this. And I also want to say that this last weekend, David was the featured keynote speaker at the annual White Collar Conference. And I can't wait to get into all this. Before we do, I want to recognize our show sponsor, who likes spending a couple of weekends walking the car lot looking for a car. Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a trip to go get a root canal. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you, negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. All right, David Israel, here we are. We made it.
Nice to see you in person, sort of meet you there face to face for sure. But yeah, excited. Thanks for the nice intro, boy.
Well,
that was an award.
I am so impressed by every time you got knocked down, you got back up and you figured out a way. And for anybody and there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this program because it's all about getting knocked down, getting back up. But I'm curious, David, were you always like that growing up as a kid? What were you like as a kid? Were you always trying to do things, figure things, scale things? What was going on as you were growing up?
Yeah, well, I was an unplanned child to older parents.
Okay.
So they had me when they were 46 and 45. And I had 3 older siblings that were all 17 years older and up.
Wow.
So I basically had a bunch of parents by the time I was 4 or 5.
Did.
And I had a lot of energy, tons and tons of energy. So I kept my parents young and busy. But I remember, I was always interested in when I found something I liked to hold on to it and try to make it better. I know it's hard to say cars or whatever, Hot Wheels and stickers. And I remember my mom, I had all these stickers and she told me to go out to the end of the driveway when I was 7 or 8 and sell them. So I took 2 of those old grocery boxes and I set up a stand like you would lemonade back then and started selling my stickers and trading. So I would say that.
And you were what, 7 or 8 years old?
Yeah. And it was, she really ingrained that into me. Then when I was 14, she made me get a job. And I worked at the local Denny's, the graveyard shift as a dishwasher, and she would drop me off and pick me up and then bring me to school. So she had me she had me working and doing things out of the gate. I mean, I was not afraid to work. Trust me. I wasn't afraid to
No,
get
I mean, if
hands
you're
dirty.
working the graveyard shift at 14, that's not something people are standing in line for as eighth graders.
No, and you're not just the dishwasher either, because at Denny's at that time, you were the only guy there besides the cooks and the waitress, and you would be the busboy too, and the vacuumer and everything. So I really learned how to work. I had a really good work ethic. I had a lot of a respect for people and
Yeah.
who they were, and I think that was really important because
Yeah.
I just dove into everything head first and really took everything I did. I took very seriously.
Did that roll for you into high school? I mean, were you a normal like high school life kid playing sports and social and all that, or were you more of trying to tinker and figure things out kid?
No, I listen. I played a lot of sports until I was 14, until I had to work graveyard.
Yeah.
Then really, I became more of. I started recognizing what I wanted. I was always trying to think of how I could create something, a business or whatever. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't have a business when I was 15 or 16, but I worked. I always had a job. I got out of the graveyard thing. Only lasted about 6 months because they didn't like me falling asleep in school. Um, So, but like I said, it did teach me a lot. I was never afraid to do anything. So in high school, I became a doorman at this nightclub. It was underage, but they were open from 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. until 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Uh, and I started as a doorman. Then I became the manager. Uh, and then I started seeing how much we were paying the guys, the janitorial staff, how much we were paying the guys to come and sweep the parking lot. I'm like, well, I'll do it. So I literally I was doing everything. And like I said, I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty. I just wanted to work and earn because
Yeah.
I didn't come from a prominent family. And I had to work. So it taught me, look, it teaches you a lot, when you're not working with an ego, and I think, again, it just taught me a lot.
Well, and I think that's what you just said there as a guy that started working the door at a nightclub. The natural transition is not necessary to look at their expenses and what they're paying and what you could do and what you could save. So, I mean, I think that you're wired that way. And the other thing that I think is interesting about you, David, as far as how you tackle things, and I think you have to be wired this way, especially if you're somebody that's going to try to build or scale or be an entrepreneur, is you're not really afraid to go in and just try it and do it. And, if you see it, you figure that there's going to be obstacles you're going to have to overcome. So you might as well just jump in and figure that out as you go. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people on the sidelines. I think that's something that, you hear a lot of people in their 60s and 70s, they've worked at the same job at the same place, and they think, I wish I could own my own business. And I think a lot of it is just the fear factor of just jumping in the deep end.
I agree. I mean, fear is one. The other is that you overthink it, right? So I've been at trade shows and I've had guys come up to me and they go, "Can't believe what you've done. You're a genius." I said, "No, no, no, no. If I was a genius, I would have figured out why it didn't work up front. I just believed I could do it, and I jumped in and did it. I said I've become really good at getting hit by trucks. I mean, it's going to happen. Nothing is smooth sailing. Okay, I mean,
Right.
the largest companies, Boeing, just recently Boar's Head. I mean, Nestle, they all encounter problems. I mean, you just can't help it. No matter how great you are, or how big you are, or how many controls you have in place, shit's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to realize that and know that there's always a way around it. You can always put it behind you. You have to learn, not do it again. Hopefully, don't get hit by that same truck.
Well, that's probably the biggest key is there's nothing at all wrong with making mistakes, because that's all the greatest books you read. Those are the things they learn from and grow from. It's making the same mistake twice that's a killer. So is that how you got into the nightclub thing because you couldn't have been very old then, right?
No, I was 19 when I got ownership. There were 3 partners. None of them came to I was there doing everything.
Yeah.
It was very successful. But they would meet quarterly and they would fight quarterly. And one day I'm there cleaning. It's a Sunday. I'm cleaning. They had their meeting, and one of the owners walked out and said, "Do you want to buy me?" And I said, "I don't have the money to buy you." And he said, "Well, pay me out of the profits." And I was like, "That sounds
That
like
works.
a slam dunk." Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. And then it's just one of the owners bought out the other guy. So it was me and him, 2/3 to 1/3.
Yeah.
And I don't know, a few years later, he bought me out. So, yeah.
Well, and like I'm thinking like the different things, because I know your story and how some of these things, but so the one that I don't know so well is the jewelry store. How did that fit into your world?
Well, that's an interesting story. That was a complete flop that worked out really well in my favor. So after the nightclub, I took the money and I was literally buying luxury cars in Los Angeles and then driving them up. And I would have a free car. I would drive a nice car for a month and then I would sell it to a local dealership. Mm-hmm. I had a deal with the Mercedes dealer and the Porsche dealer here in Seattle, Washington. And they would tell me what they wanted. I would go to LA and buy. It was a different market back then. Everything was in classified ads, and there was a massive amount of inventory there, and there wasn't one here. I mean, now it's a business for people, but for me, I got to drive a nice car. I would make $3,000-$4,000 a car, so it was great.
Yeah, sounds like a good little side hustle.
So I put a chunk away, and my older brother worked for a jewelry chain before he moved to Los Angeles, and I became friends with one of his friends who was 20 years older than me, and they had sold the jewelry chain. And he said, I'm going to open up a new jewelry store in this mall up north. That was a decent mall at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "Would you like to be my partner?" I was like, "Well, that's a slam dunk." Well, one, he doesn't like to work, so that wasn't good, and he wasn't very thorough, so that wasn't good. But we had a store, and we're there maybe 7 or 8 months. It's not going great. I mean, it's not horrible, but it's not going to be successful. We can tell, because all the stores are closing.
And the mall.
And like Nordstrom's pulled out. Back then it was a Marshall and Field store there. Mm-hmm. They pulled out, it's not that we thought they were pulling out. It's not that they were pulling out. They weren't, the owners weren't renewing the lease because Home Depot and Costco wanted to develop the property. Or they wanted to develop.
They wanted the real estate. Yeah.
So it turned out well for me because the guy who brought me into this signed a 4-year lease. The lease became much more valuable.
A lot of leverage.
Yeah. So I made a decent chunk. Thank God that we sold. I mean, otherwise I would have lost every penny I had. So I made a decent chunk. And when I sold that, this is what leads me into my next endeavor. Jewelry business is very small. I mean, it's a very tight-knit group, right? As soon as I sold and word got on the street, these jewelry stores, they start calling me to borrow money. "Hey, can you loan me some money?" I'm like, "Well, I'll loan you money, but I need collateral. I don't, I'm
right. Not just a free end loan.
Yeah.
No collateral.
I started loaning money to jewelry stores, then to coin stores, then to pawn shops. None of them could get, smaller companies. It was really hard to get financing. So,
mm-hmm. So it was like a hard money loan, basically.
I called my company First Funds, and I started loaning them money. Then I ended up buying the oldest, largest rare coin dealership in Seattle because a guy that I was loaning money to said the guy wanted to retire and he was selling it for $400,000. He said, but his inventory is worth like $700,000. So I said, "Okay, I'll finance it. You trade out, you sell off the inventory, pay me back plus a profit, and I'm out." So I did that for about 9 months. And then again, I got back to my First Funds and I was loaning money primarily now to, the jewelers and to pawn shops. But I'm in these pawn shops and I'm like, they're horrible. They're disgusting. And then the customer service is like, they treat their customers like crap and they look like crap on top of it.
Yeah.
I was like, boy, this is interesting. I get a Fortune magazine and this is in 1991 or 92. And there's an article on this company called Cash America out of Dallas, Texas, that is buying mom and pop shops and transitioning them into retail establishments. And they went public and they're going haywire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got on a plane, I went to Dallas, and I started checking out their stores. Then I came back and I met with a local, very successful investor, entrepreneur, older man, and I told him what I he said, well, you have to understand what they do, replicate it here. He says you need to build this whole plan, and he put me in touch with Deloitte Touche, the leadership there, with this very high level attorney, and I put a team together, and I went back down to Dallas, and this time I brought an 8mm cassette, and I would go to all their stores, and I would say, I would like to get a camera for my wife, but I need to make sure it works. And they say, okay, and I slap that tape in, and I would videotape the whole store, and I did that. That's how I came back, and I literally built everything off of what I saw and read. And I raised a little bit of capital and opened up my first store in 1993.
That's fascinating, because, I love reading, biographies of entrepreneurs' stories. And that's a lot what Sam Walton did when, he got into the deal, and he'd fly in and, look for land, but then he'd go walk the aisles of Kmart and figure out what they were doing right, what they were doing wrong. But I mean, the idea of being able to duplicate something that you like, that you think that maybe you could improve on, sounds like what you were doing as a kid. You're just putting it and plugging it into a business that, well, these could be nicer. They could be more upscale. They could look like this. I'm going to duplicate it.
Service. Yeah. All of our staff had, the managers and assistant managers wore shirts and ties. We wanted, everything was every store looked exactly the same colors, the same layout, same cabinets, very retail oriented. I didn't understand the business. Trust me, my first customer came in when we opened up that first day, came in with a Makita Sawzall. Now, if he came in with a bracelet or something like that, I could have figured it out. Yeah. I had to go in the back, call another pawn shop and say,
what is this?
I have a Makita Sawzall I want to get a loan on. How much would you loan me?
How much did you loan me?
He goes, hold it up to the phone. I mean, he thought I was a customer, right?
Right.
No, I'm just curious. He goes, well, anywhere from X to X. So I had to learn it the hard way. I mean, I literally had no clue what I was doing. We figured it out, obviously. I mean, I used to tell people, a gorilla could run one of these businesses if they knew how to shake their head yes and no. I mean, that's all they had to do.
Yeah.
But we wanted to take it to a different level, and we did. Cash America, all they would have had to do is come in and change the sign. It was the same colors,
it was
same store, just a different name, right? It was called Pawn Exchange. So what's funny is in 2007, when they bought us, that's all they did is change.
Change the sign. Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, we built it from one store in 93. We had 14 by the end of 96. The founders of Costco and Starbucks became my investors, and then their boards joined.
Wow, you were rolling, David. I mean, that's everybody's dream, to have that type of people that you're on part of your team to grow something like that.
It was pretty amazing. It was blown away. And not part of my story was when I met with Jeff Brotman, the founder of Costco. He came back pretty quick with an offer for his group to invest, which included Howard Schultz and the boards of both, basically boards of both companies.
Yeah. And
I'm like, no, we can get more money for less equity somewhere else. And he goes, well, $1 isn't $1. And I'm like, what does that mean? I just need the money, right?
Right.
He's like, no. He goes, you want people that are going to be here to help you grow and understand when you need to raise more capital and have kind of been there, done that.
Have access to it, right?
Yeah. He says, plus you need inventory. And he goes, Costco takes a lot of returns that we don't know what to do with, and we can help you. I'm like,
good point.
I went home and then I talked to one of my advisors, and he's like, don't you dare say no. Right.
Right. No brainer.
He ended up being a great mentor. And obviously,
which is always a big deal. That I think, people, if they can humble themselves to find people that they admire and go and ask them questions, usually a guy that's doing well is pretty proud of how they're doing it. And they'll tell you kind of how you're doing it and what they're doing, because they've put their systems together and they like to teach other people what they know. Yeah,
it was a great experience. So I was very honored, obviously. And then I was in the media for being the hot everything around here. So I won the Emerging Business of the Year award. I mean, it was crazy. So
It was a fast track.
Wild ride. Yep.
And, David, that's what's crazy about the craziness of your story is you're on a rocket ship launch. And then I think if I remember right, you hear murmurs of like gossip that they're maybe looking at one of your stores. And then you call down there and say, "Hey, by the way, are you checking me out?" And what did they say?
No,
No.
you're just probably people like to talk. It's just a bunch of bullshit.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't.
Oh.
Obviously. I was an open book. I mean, I would have been happy to speak to them and share whatever they wanted. But one day I'm in my office in 1996. We had corporate offices, and I was there, and one of my managers calls me and says, "Hey, there's detectives here. They have a search warrant. They want to take the computer." I'm like, "What?" And
Yeah.
some guys, let me talk to him. I'm like, "Hello." And he goes, "Yes, this is Detective Peterson." He goes, "We have a warrant. We're going to take your computer." I said, "Well, sir, that's okay. But if you take our computer, you put us out of business because that's
Right.
how we operate." He goes, "Well, I'll." And what's funny, there's an alarm on the phone system, not on the phones, but it goes through so it beeps now and then.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "Are you recording me? You can't record me." I said, "No, sir. That's just the alarm system beeping." I said, "I'm not recording you." I said, "I didn't even know you were going to call me."
Right. This is kind of a shock.
He agreed. They shut us down for that afternoon, and then half the next day they let my manager come down and get the computer. But yeah, it was the most bizarre ride. I mean,
You got to kind of walk us through this thing because it's one of the most fascinating. Because I've heard a lot. I think this is my 145th interview. Your story is uniquely bizarre on how you got tagged in this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sure is. I mean, looking back, Brent, I mean, I should accept responsibility for listening to an attorney and not going to the police to tell them what I knew.
Yeah.
But I didn't, and that's cowardly and poor choices on my part. But I did have advice from a criminal attorney to just shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm. Which that's what they say.
Well, hindsight, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, this person he did sell us. He sold us items, no doubt about it. And we bought them and we put them in our inventory. He came through a jeweler that I knew in another part of Seattle, very reputable jeweler, who knew we needed inventory. And yeah, so we went down that path.
Was there any way of knowing, and I don't know anything about that business, David, but that's the one thing, you never know what you're getting at a pawn shop because a lot of times, I mean, I don't know how everybody gets their inventory, but I mean, what you see on TV is people will just come in, they'll find something or one of their parents has died and they've got all this stuff and they're trying to get rid of it. They're trying to put a value to it, but you don't really know much about these things, do you?
No. Well, you can tell with some. Okay,
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious. When the retail consumers came in, everything got entered and sent off, into the system, and then it got sent off to the police.
Okay.
When pocket vendors, the guys that go to, what do you call it? Like these shows. What do they call those shows where they have? I forget.
You mean like auctions and stuff, or
auctions, but also to those where they have these little shows where people go and sell stuff.
Yeah, not trade shows, but yeah, I know what you're talking.
Go around and they pick stuff off, and that's their job. I mean, some guys sell watches, some guys sell electronics, some guys sell tools, and they build a reputation. This guy had a reputation for selling.
It's almost like a flea market deal.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, he would already buy it off of people and whatever. That was his business.
Yeah,
and he was selling to not just to me. He was selling to many
right.
and rare coin companies up and down. But he also had another side gig, which wasn't helpful to me whatsoever.
Right.
This guy, smooth. And it's funny. My father passed away. I was not in the store. I only came in to help for like an hour a day for a little over probably 2 weeks. And I would come in and I would get cash from my partner as he needed it. I would help out however, paperwork or whatever, and I would leave. So one day I go in, and at our little gathering, my mom said, I ran into Mrs. Burtonshaw, and she sent the best and said that she's so sorry. This is an old neighbor. Doesn't live next to us anymore. Don't even really know. I know she lives in the same city, but I'd never been to their house. Don't know where they live. So I go back. I go to my store, and my partner who I grew up with, who also knew the Burtonshaws, I said, my mom saw Mrs. Burtonshaw, and she sent her best regards. My mom said she had a diamond the size of her knuckle on her ring. And he's like, oh, wow, okay. That is it. Okay. I mean, that's end of the story. No more conversation. How is she or whatever it may be, how the kids. He was in the store, this person, and he overheard. And I think 3 days later, him and his guys, which I didn't know, but I heard they got robbed on the news. I go back into my office. I'm still not working, but I come in 2 days after what I saw on the news, and my partner, my high school buddy, says, we have a problem. I go, what's our problem? He goes, that guy, Vince, came in and he wants to sell us stuff that he took from the Burtonshaws, or he's going to wrap us into it. And I go, no. I call this criminal attorney. I go, hey, we have a problem. I mean, I know what to do. He says, okay. He says, you tell that guy to take a hike and you won't say shit. And that's it. Guy comes in 4 hours later. I say, man, nothing. We're not touching this stuff. I'm not going to say nothing. You just need to go away. He's like, well, I got to do something. I said, we're not doing anything. And I haven't a part of this. This is, he goes, well, I'll pin it on you if you say anything. We're not going to say shit. My attorney said, don't say shit. He left. 2 weeks later, he comes back. He goes, I'm going to need a little something to leave you alone. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, I need something. I said, well, we're not doing anything. He goes, you're going to give me something. And I'd like talked to my partner, and we said, okay, we're going to gave him like $4,000.
Just a shakedown.
Just to leave us alone. He left us alone again for 60 days and came back, whatever. But we think, okay, you know what? I think we gave him one more time. And then he came back again. He started threatening me and threatening my wife. And I'm like, you know what, man? We're done. Just I'm not going to get into this where it's every few months you come back. I said, not going to work. I said, we're done. I said, I'm not going to say shit. He's like, if you say something, you're going to be dead. I said, not saying nothing, but you need to go away. He went away, and I never heard from him again. 3 years later, that's when the rumblings started. And I didn't realize it was for that. I had no idea.
Right.
But boy, once they took that computer, then they took my partner in. They gave everybody immunity. That guy, what happens is he got put in prison for something else. Tries to buy his way out. He came up with this story about not just
big conspiracy.
Me and Brad were their gang's crime bosses or whatever, right? Well, this guy, just FYI, I don't know anything other than this one thing. Honest to God, I had no clue until the documents were sent to me. In another part of Washington, he went into a jewelry store. He talked to the salesperson. She had on a bunch of jewelry, and he's like, oh, and he says, I'm in the jewelry business, blah, blah, blah. And she tells him, they start having a conversation. And she says, I have a ton of jewelry. Well, they followed her home.
It hits her.
Yeah. Did the same thing. He went and saw a dentist. He went to see a dentist. He talked to them. He was talking about his big house in Normandy Park, and he's got, went and robbed him. He was driving on I-5. He sees an RV with Canadian plates speeding, puts on his emergency lights, pulls him over, says he's the police. I think he found pot or something. Again, he starts milking them for money for months until they finally said, we can't take anymore, and they called the police. So he tried to use this to negotiate his way out of prison. I got charged on December 2nd, 1996. It was the last day they could charge me under the statutes of limitations. But before that, or I think it was the next day, they offered me receiving stolen property in 90 days or something. My attorney's like, this is a joke. No way. So then they filed something, they upped the charges, and we decided, I got an investigator my attorney did. He sent him out to the guy's prison to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't talk, but he ends up talking to they're called counselors. Well, you know what they are.
Case managers.
Your internal case manager.
Counselors or case managers, yeah.
Yeah, or like your parole officer, but inside. So he ended up talking to his case manager, and the guy's like, oh, man. He goes, he told me he made this whole thing up and bought his way out of trouble. So
told it to the case manager.
Yeah, my attorney's like, this is a slam dunk. He goes, we're not going to waive the speedy trial rule. He goes, we're going to rush this because we got this witness. And we did. We got to trial within 2 months. We show up there. Judge Mertel is there. And I don't remember what they're talking about, but the prosecutor says, hey, we're going to contest that witness because we believe it's either hearsay or privileged information. And the judge, I don't know, they took a little time, and he goes, no. He goes, he's going to be allowed. She said, well, then we need a recess. And they walked 2 blocks up and filed an appeal.
Wow.
On his decision. So that was the end of the first trial. I went home for 3 years unknowingly. I mean, I didn't understand how this worked, but I ended up starting.
Did you think at that time that it was over? Or what did you think?
No,
because they were appealing it. So
I was in limbo.
You were in purgatory.
He didn't dismiss any charges.
So you were living with the charges. They took it on appeal, and you were having to live basically like you were living in pre-trial.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Not knowing what was going to happen.
Hard guy to hire.
I had to start a company.
Yeah.
Which I did. And I started, it's called Transmedia, and we invented and patented the frames that allow for truck side advertising with banners. It was going really well. But in 1999, they came back and they ruled I could not have this witness because it would be hearsay, not privilege, but hearsay. So we had to go to trial. My partner, who I started the business with, was like, look, man, I can't go through this with you. I need to buy you out. And I had to sell, which became a very valuable company.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to put that money towards legal.
What you were, anyway, yeah.
Right. Then we went to trial. That person did not testify, the guy who implicated me, because the prosecutor tried to revoke his immunity, saying he was a liar.
Yeah. See, I thought that was really interesting because they brought him all the way in from prison, unshackled him.
Next one.
Oh, it's the next one. Okay. Yeah. So this happened twice.
No, this time he wasn't a witness because they wanted to revoke his immunity.
Okay. So he had immunity. They said that he was going to, because I was thinking the guy that was going to plead the fifth, but that's down the road.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So I have this trial without him. His co-conspirators were there. They really didn't have anything much to say. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, there was no jewelry in my inventory after the date of that robbery. Before there was, I mean, we put it in inventory. I mean,
sure,
we weren't trying to hide anything.
Right.
Not very much either. It was not. I mean, it was just maybe $2,000 worth of stuff. But nonetheless, I have this trial which goes on for 6 weeks, and no direct witnesses. Everybody's got immunity,
except you.
The guy that I'm one of his partners, that's my co-defendant, gives my family a note that says, "I'm sorry, I know you're innocent." We try to get it submitted. He can't say anything about it. They said it's just a note. They can't. I have no proof it's him. So that went out the window. Anyway, my attorneys tells me, man, you're going to win this. It's a slam dunk. So we go into the 4 or 5 weeks or 6 weeks of trial, and then 2 weeks of a jury deliberation.
You have a very optimistic attorney, by the way, as you tell this story.
Then we come back in. They finally come in, and you know what? I've never been arrested. I had to go in and sign something. I've never been in jail. And these are pretty serious charges, right? Conspiracy, robbery, kidnapping, whatever they did, I was responsible for.
You were part of the conspiracy, and you
Yeah.
have to prove it all if
Mhm.
you're a part of the conspiracy. A lot of people don't know that. You don't just prove your piece; you have to prove the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, they didn't do a good job, but apparently the jury. I remember standing there, and the judge looks super. Just he looks like he turned pale, and they read the verdicts that I was found guilty, and
Mm.
the bailiffs, the King County guards start coming towards me, and the judge says, hold on, Mr. Israel's not going anywhere. He goes, we're gonna get this done. We're gonna let him go home. We'll set a hearing for sentencing. He goes, but he's not going anywhere. I'm like, wow, I didn't expect that, but it's pretty devastating, right? So anyway, I go
Yeah.
home. My attorney says, enjoy your family and your kids as much. They gave me 4 months, basically. So we're traveling around, and remember, we're sitting at a pool, and my kids are in the pool playing, and I get a call from my attorney, and he's like, are you sitting down? I go, well, why is that? He goes, well, I have some news. I said, well, how bad could it get? I said, it's already over. I said, I'm laying down. I'm in the sun. He goes, well, Vince Bryant wrote a letter to the judge and to the Seattle Times to declare your innocence and that he made up the whole thing. And he's called us. He says, so we're moving for a hearing to get this
Before the judge, yeah.
Get dismissed. So now I get an extra 60 days because they have to figure out how to bring this guy in from prison for this hearing. So I'm happy for that. Now I go from what was going to be a July date to September. And we go to show up, and they bring this guy in, this huge court. We had to move courtrooms. There were so many people, the media and people, and they bring him in. He's in shackles. They undo him. They put him on the stand, and we're all waiting, and they swear him in. And the judge says to my attorney that he says, Mr. Topel, you're a witness. And he stands up, and the prosecutor stands up and says, excuse me. And they go, yes. I might want to recommend that Mr. Bryant invoke his Fifth Amendment right. And the judge says, why would you do that? She says, well, we're in appeals to revoke his immunity. And anything he says here today, we're going to use against him. His attorney stands up and says, yeah, I must insist that he doesn't testify here today.
Man, what were you thinking, David?
I just sunk. But then the judge says, well, someone from that prison wrote those letters, and someone from that prison called Mr. Topel. And I believe those are recorded calls. He goes, we're going to go home. We're going to have a handwriting analysis done, and we're going to get that recording.
What a good judge.
Yeah. So I don't know what it was. 3-4 weeks later, he reverses the majority of the verdicts, but not all of them. So the prosecutor appeals that. And of course, we appeal the other one he doesn't. Right?
Yeah.
And I have another 2.5 years. So I start a new business. Cleaning.
Well, it's just crazy how, each and every one of these times you get long spans of time here, and you build these businesses up. And I think this one is really interesting because you take a job, I think it's in a fitness place, and you're a janitor, but you are really good at it. And you again look at this and think, well, maybe I could scale this, and it becomes a very successful maintenance company that does like 40 some odd, businesses or whatever for cleaning.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong on the number, but it just blew my mind.
I mean, you got it. I couldn't get hired. I mean, no one was going to hire me, at least, and not where I could make money, a decent amount of money. My wife worked for a property management company at the time, just to help offset stuff. And she came from pharmaceuticals, but we were both at home to make sure our kids were safe and taken care of.
And I meant to ask you, David, because I know that your kids were really young at this point, right? Weren't they like?
Initially, they were 4 and 6 months when they.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they had to go through the entire ride. We kept them very well insulated. Believe me, that was our entire goal, was to make sure that our kids were okay and safe, right? and insulated from whatever I was going through in the media and everything else. When we did it, I'm telling you, we knocked it. We did that. We did it very successfully.
And it's hard to do that. I mean, I have 3 daughters, and my daughters were teenagers. Well, 2 of them were teenagers at the time, and then the other one, as the time went on, became teenager. But it's tough for families to go through all of that, and you do have to insulate. Yeah, but we did the best we could to keep them up to speed at the age they were about what was going on, so that they weren't surprised. We were lucky because we had a good support group of teachers and friends and stuff around that they didn't get the bullying and all the weirdness that happens, which I think, I'm grateful today for that, but it's so tough. We don't think about, like you and I went through it. Our families go through it. Our families go to prison too, and they have to deal with all that. So kudos to your wife too, for
100%. I mean, she believed in me from day. I mean, she's my best friend. I mean, she
knows
everything.
You've almost got to have a superhero wife to withstand what we go through. For sure.
I did. And we were fortunate, and I'm very grateful as well for the community support we had, for the teachers and the schools. And I mean, even
you never forget that.
No, no, I'll give some real enormous credit when they were in public schools, and we decided we needed to get them out of that situation because I kept being in the media. And there was this all-girls Catholic school that was very elite near our house, and we thought that would be a good dynamic for them. We didn't think they were going to let us in, especially because I'd already been in the media.
Yeah,
but they did, and not only did they let us in, they were like, "We really believe in you, and we believe you, and we want to make sure that your kids are okay."
And that means the world. I mean, you and I were lucky with that because, my kids were really heavy into sports, playing tennis and such, and the coaches couldn't have been any better. The teachers couldn't be. In fact, my youngest daughter is a teacher today and a coach because of the support that she got from her teachers at that time. And so that's something that stays with you.
So important. I mean, actually, they went to us. Bill and Melinda Gates were there with their children, and they would have our daughter over, and they would come to our house. I mean, they were super. It was just it sent a message to them and to the community, not just because of the Gates, but I mean, it's
just in general. Yeah,
it was really big and big to me too because it's like made me feel better about the situation. So
but in the meantime, you're not just sitting on the sidelines; you're building a company again,
Had to. I mean, I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't get a job. So my wife was a property manager. She was complaining about the janitors that were cleaning this one fitness facility in a condominium complex. And I'm like, oh, well, she goes, we pay them $600 a month. They come once a week, maybe for an hour. I was like, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
Right. So they gave me told her boss, the boss gave me that thing. The feedback, I was pretty immaculate. I mean, I'm a little anal. So I cleaned that place like no tomorrow.
Yeah, you were good at it.
Oh yeah. So then that got back to the management company. They said, do you want to do this complex? Do you want to do that complex? I started out with one. By the end of the year, I had 45 properties that I was doing myself.
Which is a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I was just vacuuming, cleaning. Then they asked me if I could change light bulbs. Like, well, of course I can change light bulbs.
That's the old joke.
Light bulbs. So then I hired some people to help me and I got more. So by almost 3 years later, I had 450 properties that we were responsible for. And I turned into, we called it Home Pro. And we did facilities maintenance, which is janitorial. We did full electrical. We did plumbing. And we did not major construction, but we could do painting. We could paint a complex.
Yeah, everything to get it ready.
I could do minor repairs, but I could not, like, if decks need to replace, that was above and beyond us.
Yeah.
Nothing structural. So we grew into quite a behemoth. But then the appeal came back. They ruled in our favor, but then they had the right to retry me, and that's what they were going to do.
They said they were going to retry you, even after all this had gone through. That's what I find just absolutely fascinating about this story.
Yep.
Is that you went through all these layers and steps, and then they still have the opportunity to retry you on a case that they know is so flimsy.
Oh, it's ugly. I mean, it is not. I mean, everybody in the world is apologizing to me. Not the judge yet, but
And it's been what, 7 years at this
it was
point?
7 years. Yeah. So it happened. I got charged in '96 in December, and then in July of 2003 is when they came back. That when it finally was like, now we're going to retry you, and I'm like, I mean, I called an attorney, and you know how this works. They want a bunch of money up front.
Mm-hmm.
I had already spent $1.4 million or something. I mean, no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't get ahead, really. So I'm like, I just need this to end. I mean, I can't go through a trial again. I just can't do this. I can't do it to my family either.
Right.
So we got an attorney. He called them up. He goes, okay, 18 months. And I forget what the charge was. I'm like, I'm not pleading guilty. I said, that's not coming out of my mouth. I said, I'll make a no contest plea. And for 2 weeks, we went back and forth, and they said, okay, we'll just retry you, or you can do this no contest, but it's for 5-year sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I said to my wife, I'm like, honey, I mean, I'm not going to plead guilty. I said, I can't do it. I'm not. And she said, okay. She goes, well, I'm here to support you. And I said, okay, well, I can't go through. I'm not going to risk the trial either, because last time my attorney said it was a slam dunk and I lost, which could have meant I got 20 years or something.
Sure. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And we explained it to our kids, and I just went and turned myself in, and what a lesson that was. I mean,
I want to talk about that, because going into that, before we do, I want to recognize Nightmare Success Podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group, the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white collar criminal justice system. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you that there's a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you've made it through to the other side, this is a great space for you. You can join us on Zoom Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. For information, go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Start here. So, yeah, you go through all this, David, 7 years. You're worn out, tired, don't want to go through to get retried.
Broke.
You turn yourself in. What's it like?
Well, I don't, you don't know what you don't know, right? And my last day, we spent the day with my kids, and we took them to a friend's house, and then Julie and I had some time together, and she drives me down to turn myself into the local to the jail where you turn yourself into. And I just put on a t-shirt and shorts because I knew it was going to get thrown out. So I walked in, and I said, hey, hi. He goes, are you here to visit? I said, no, I'm here to turn myself in. And he says, what's your name? He goes, okay, may I have your ID? I said, well, I didn't bring my ID. He goes, well, you have to have your ID. I said, well, who else would come?
Can I get somebody else to stand in with my ID?
I mean, no one's going to come and turn themselves in for 5 years if it's not me. He goes, sorry. He goes, I can't let you in without your ID. He goes, how much time do you need to get your ID? I said, I said, about an hour. He goes, how long? I said, an hour. He goes, is 11 p.m. okay? I said, no. I said, it's. He goes, is 11 p.m. okay?
I'm trying to help you out here.
Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, that's fine, right? I'm like, wow, okay. So I spent some more time with my wife. Went to Costco for a hot dog. Went back, and by that time the front was closed, and I had to go in the back door. And they let me in this, I forget the breezeway or whatever, where you go in one door, it closes, and then you go through the next one. And when I'm walking, they told me to walk down the hall to the front desk. When I get to the front desk, the guy said, are you here to see a client? I said, no.
Wish I was.
They just let me in, pretty much. I said, they just let me in. Anyway, yeah, they throw me in a holding cell, and that's when
things get real.
Yep. And you're now you got to figure out how everything works. And
what do you think was your biggest shock within the first 24 hours?
The kindness and humanity that I encountered from guys that wanted to help me out.
Yeah. That's exactly what mine was too, David, because you see all this stuff on the outside. And I know why it's that way, because it's sizzly and it sells and all that. But I mean, it was within the first hour for me that, my bunkmate was showing me how to make my bed military style. He was helping clean out my locker. And, he was part of a gang. I mean,
Mhm,
he was,
mhm.
he couldn't have been any nicer. Then
Yeah,
he goes over and introduces me to a guy that can help me get a job. Um, it, it was very humbling because you get very humbled anyway, walking through, like, your freedom sheds off your skin. But the perception that probably changed me more than anything was that, wow, there's a lot of guys in here that, yeah, they made a mistake in that, but they're, I mean, a lot of really smart guys that,
that's
were
what I
doing
see.
drug stuff that if they knew how to scale, market,
Yep,
set up basically the franchises, the
exactly.
commissions, it's just, yeah,
Exactly. I mean, I would blew me away because you go in with that perception of what you
yeah,
see on TV, right?
yeah.
And my whole thing was like, I'm just going to keep to myself and not talk to these
Well, some people
moronic.
say to do that, don't let anybody in. Don't
Yeah.
give anything to you. Don't do it.
No, I learned. I mean, I was like, there are some smart guys that
Hmm.
just were brought up in the wrong environment or didn't have opportunities.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of them don't want the opportunities, by the way. But I mean, but there are some super smart people.
Yeah. In any situation, there's the bad and the good,
Yeah.
and I never want to be misunderstood on that. I mean, there's people that continually get into wrong, it could be mental situation, could be whatever, but, um, there's a lot of guys that want to do good. And
Yep.
that's the struggle is that these guys want to do good, but they have such a difficult time. And that's another thing that you understand once you learn about these stories of these guys, the backgrounds that they have, you then see how much harder it is for them to step out into society because we just build walls all around that
Yeah.
they can't jump over.
Well, and plus, against a lot of times the prosecution or their correctional officers are also making it challenging for them. On top
Yeah,
of it, they
right.
like to see them fail. Uh, so no, I learned a lot about myself, about people. Boy, respect,
Yeah,
right? I mean, that's the
it's
number one
it's a
thing.
primitive environment. Respect is the common denominator.
You're damn right. If you demand respect and you give respect, you're golden, right?
Right.
And I learned that, gosh, within the first few weeks, it was like you got to hold your own, and you don't have to be a jerk about it. You just have
No,
to be respectful.
and David, I think, and would you agree with this? I think that guys who have problems on the inside, getting along and getting in fights, I think they have that same problem on the outside. I think guys that can get along with people, adjust, try to adapt, respect, those people do okay in prison. I think that there's a dynamic that, yes, it's much more of a primitive environment, but you can, however you got along on the outside is probably how you're going to get along on the inside, unless you get into some weird, scrape up that you can't get out of. That's,
Yeah.
hits you upside the head.
No, I learned a lot. Learned a lot about people, and I mean, I don't know about when I went before I went. People said you don't talk to the you don't get friendly with the guards because then the inmates won't like you.
Yeah, you're snitching or whatever.
I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I don't. I started talking to everybody. I'm like, there are people. I'm like, look, man. I
Yeah.
said, I'm going to treat people the way I want to be treated. I don't care
Right. Like you
what
always have.
what side you're on.
Right.
And what's
What
interesting is my days working the door at the nightclub taught me a lot about how
probably
to
helped you out a lot.
communicate with people and size them up, right?
Yep.
So uh, it's weird how my history and my skills were grown, and when I got there, I could really rely on them to.
Yeah.
Man, I just learned how to to communicate with people, and then there's the ones that you just don't communicate with
You
because
don't.
you can't, right?
No, you just figure out how to move.
Yeah,
And
right.
once you figure that out, you figure out what all the inmate rules are,
Hmm.
make sure you don't do that. You can move and adapt in a society that,
Yeah,
and I think one of the other thing too, David, it gives you is it, both of us came from places where we had things. And when you get down to a plastic chair, a locker, and a bunk bed, you realize that you can adapt to that too.
hmm,
It's just, you got to figure it out. And, but I want to get to this thing about when you're in there, your brain's still on go. I mean, that's the one thing. They don't take your brain.
no,
Your brain's still on go. You're trying to figure out what's my next move. And you figure out this popcorn thing. can you run us through this?
I'll try to make it quick. I know we're going long here, but when I went there, I told my wife, I'm going to find a business to create to make that prosecutor sorry that she sent me. I mean, that she did this to me. So initially I saw guys working out with, towels around the bars to do bicep stuff and all kinds of cool. So I was like, oh, fitness from the inside out. I'm going to do a book. That wasn't where I ended up. Then you see them cooking all, like you did, you see them cooking all this really
very creatively
way of making food. I'm like, how do they do that? So I was like, hey, I'm going to do a cookbook from here. And, well, that wasn't it. But in my last 6 months in minimum security, these two guys were cellmates. They used to get microwave popcorn off the store commissary, and they would pop it. They would put it in a big clean garbage bag. Melt some caramels, and then throw the caramel M&Ms, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and chop up a Rocky Road candy bar. And they'd blend it all up, and then they'd put it into smaller garbage bags and trade it off. And everybody used to go crazy. I followed a strict diet, so if it wasn't on my cheat day, I didn't eat it. But my brother would say, man, you got to try this stuff. This is unbelievable. I'm like, yeah, okay. So maybe, I don't know, 4 weeks in, I try a bite, and I'm like, holy cow, this is a business, right? So I started asking the people from the outside to send me information on the popcorn industry, and I wrote a short business plan. I knew what I was going to call it. Initially it was called Pop Concorn. And
I like that.
The original, the initial product was the original Big House. Still have a bag here somewhere. Anyway, I did that. And when I came home, I started mixing this up and giving it to friends, and they're all going nuts. I mean, they're like, this is crazy. So I had to write a larger business plan, and I raised a little bit of capital. Most of the guys from Costco and Starbucks wanted to support me. Not a lot, but a little bit. Particularly the CFO of Costco was really supportive. So I started making it in my kitchen, and I took it to a local grocery store, and I asked them if they would be interested. And the guy called me up. He said, hey, we're gonna give it a shot. I said, well, I'll bring it to you. You guys can pay me as you said.
Whenever.
No, we'll buy it from you. Well, it started selling really well. So they put it into their other stores, and I started to understand how this works. I developed other flavors. And I was in maybe 10 or 12 stores in Seattle in my third month. And I said I'm looking at the shelf, and I said to my wife, I go, these are really unique, but they're still similar to other products on the shelf. Caramel, chocolate, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And how do I explain the Big House, right? I mean, I that's all I called it. I didn't say it was a, plethora of flavors or something like that.
Right.
But it was super good, very high quality.
Yeah.
So I said to her, I got to do, she goes, well, you should do something more of these trendy flavors like white truffle or chocolate salted caramel. So I create this white truffle, very high-end, beautiful product, and a chocolate salted caramel. And I take it to the stores. They put it on the shelves. And this woman that I knew ate my white truffle. And she goes, this is unbelievable. She goes, Oprah loves white truffle. I go, oh, really? So I didn't just send her. I put together a package. I sent it back to O Magazine.
Why not?
What the heck, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in now our first little office on a Friday, and I get a phone call. Hi, this is Lauren from O Magazine in New York. I'm like, hi. She goes, yeah. Hey, Oprah loved your product. She goes, would it be possible to get 4 cases of the white truffle by tomorrow? I said, on a Saturday? She goes, we'll give you our FedEx number. Is it possible? I'm like, yes, it's possible.
It's possible.
So I went
yes,
and
it is.
Made it, packaged it up, and sent it to her. 2 months later, she puts us in the magazine as one of her favorite things.
Wow.
And, it was
there you go.
Off the charts. And
so that goes off the charts, David, but the Good Planet Foods, was it your wife that brought you the idea? That I'm trying to remember how that came to you.
Sister-in-law.
Sister-in-law, because you had the two women. That's right. Your wife tells you about the better tasting stuff, and then your sister-in-law tells you about the good Planet
Yeah, I
Food.
owe them, don't I?
But you still got to take action. Everybody
Yeah.
can be given an idea.
But can I say one quick thing about Pop Gourmet? When it turned into
Yeah.
Pop Gourmet, we
Yeah.
hired over 220
Oh, I didn't want. Yes.
that were transitioning back from prison. The whole thing was built around, I'm going to give these people jobs. And many of them went on to do bigger and better things. One, Joe, who I hired that did our design, went on to Facebook. Some didn't do so well. Some just use it as a stepping pad. And,
But what I love about that, David, and I meant to bring that up because I have it written down here, the idea that, because there's not a lot of people that have big success when they get out, but for you to be able to reach back in and know what those people, they're desperately looking for an opportunity. Some of those people are the best employees you can get because they're so desperate looking for the opportunity. And there's other people that'll blow it, but the guys like you said, used to be a guy at the door. You can evaluate. And the guy that hasn't been in prison, he could be doing something really bad. And you don't know 100%. About it anyway.
Yeah. We don't know what they're doing in their spare time.
No. Exactly. No, I love that. I thought that and one of your guys that was a bunkmate with you didn't he become like a vice president or something?
Yeah. He sure did.
It's a great story.
Yeah. Rex.
Rex.
Tyrell. Yeah. Remember he told me he said, I wish I could be a businessman like you. I go, what'd you do? He goes, well, I sold cocaine.
Yeah.
I go, so you were a businessman. You had a product,
it was just illegal.
You had customers, you had distribution, you had sales, you had
figure out commissions.
I said, you just had the wrong product.
Right.
He's like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, he was killer. He was a great guy.
So your sister-in-law gives you an idea on something that's kind of like becoming a thing, right? When you were getting into this, it's definitely, plant-based foods and all that, but it wasn't anything that you've done.
No. I thought she was nuts. I'm like, why would I do that? I mean, I'm not vegan and I don't know anything about cheese.
Right.
She suggested because she said the two products sucked. And I had just sold pop.
Or they wouldn't melt? Is that what she said?
They don't do any of that. They bubble you put them under the broiler or something. But also the ingredient deck was like this. So I tried them. I'm like, boy, this would be easy to improve upon. And I started looking at the market. But you can't do something if you're not passionate about it.
Right.
And when I started looking at the market, I started understanding the impact that dairy farming has on our environment and on the usage of water. And I was like, wow. I mean, I had the ozone layer. Did you know that flatulence from cows causes more damage to our ozone layer than fossil fuels in cars? So
there's a lot of cows.
How can that was passionate for me, that if I could help.
Well, that's a big point, David, that I don't think we could just skirt over. You do need to be passionate about something if you're going to build it and you're going to spend time on it. And
if you're going to get hit by a truck, you better be passionate about it.
Exactly.
Something's going to go wrong and otherwise you just head for the hills. Right.
Right.
So I looked at that and I saw that drove me to be more interested in wanting to do something to change that. And, Google became my best friend. I started Googling cheese processes, and I mean on Kraft Singles, it's called analog cheese. It's made from dairy powders and oils. I'm like, well, we could probably replicate that and have a similar, as good of a product with plant-based materials. And I started reaching out to there's a lot. Analog cheese probably accounts for 70% of the cheeses in the market. And there's a ton of manufacturers, producers. And I reached out to, I don't know how many in the U.S. 90% of them said no because it was non-dairy product. They didn't want to be involved. And the others were like, we'll do it, but you have to have this minimum order quantity. And that wasn't going to work. So I kept Googling and I found this company in Greece that made what they call the vegan loaf through the analog process for the Greek Orthodox holiday and for Ramadan. So I ordered it and it was very blasé. But it melted and it did a good job. So I reached out to them and asked if they would work with me. And they said no, because they didn't trust me. I'm from the U.S. I go, but this is what you do. You make products for others. They go, no. So I said, meet with me. So I went over and met with them. Within 4 hours, the CEO says, you can have whatever you want. He goes, I I know I can trust you. And
Wow.
I launched that product in mid 2018, and my first customers out of the gate were Whole Foods and Nestle.
Well, here's the thing, David, and because there's a lot of guys that listen to this, and there's 435 prisons this goes into. So I love the fact of you telling these stories because you get into these businesses. How are you handling? I'm David, and I've also served 4 years because it's out there. Do you just go with your brain, your business plan, and if it comes up, okay, or where does that come up in the world that you live in?
Yeah, well, one, I mean, I was in the media a ton for Pop. I mean, a lot. I mean, I went with
Mm-hmm.
Oprah and Live Your Best Life tour. I was in magazines. I mean, it was nonstop. I mean,
Which helps build credibility.
yeah, and tell my story, right?
Yeah.
My side and the support that I had from the Department of Corrections. I mean, I got a letter from the governor apologizing. I mean, I
Yeah.
got the works, right?
Right.
So I was on. I mean, I can't tell you how many local news channels put me on. It was crazy.
But you told your story.
Yeah, I sure did. So I was out there and I would lead. I didn't want people to hear the story from somebody else. I wanted to tell them about it.
Okay, David, I think that's a huge key because Father Joe Saccone and I were having this conversation a few podcasts back,
Mm-hmm.
and he was talking about standing out in front of his story. Now he got hit. You know, he was a sheriff of the biggest county in New Jersey, and so the New York Times outed him as being gay, and he made a very, and I hadn't thought about it before, but he said being in the closet, being gay, is a lot like being an ex-felon and hoping that no one says anything or knows anything, and then they own the story. And we talked about when you go out and tell your story, the way, however you tell your story, because it's your story, then you own the story. It's your story. And I think that's a big key that, I mean, you don't lead with it and, knock people down with it. But if you're able and given the opportunity to tell your story, whether it's a job interview or being interviewed by the press or whatever, you own the story. Then somebody can't sneak up on you and say, he didn't tell me that. No, you've been transparent. And then I think that opens up opportunities
Big time.
for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I raised a lot of capital at Pop from very influential investors. And they liked my story.
Yeah.
At Good Planet, I brought in some of the biggest funds and some of the biggest families in the world, in the food industry. The former CEO of McDonald's, the former founder and CEO of Nation Pizza. I mean, enormous billion-dollar company, billionaires. And I didn't ask them to invest. I told them my story as we were trying to build business together. And they were like, man, we need to be involved with you.
Yep.
You persevere, you own who you are, you confident and you believe in what you do.
Yep.
We need to be involved with somebody like you. One, when you're clear and you're transparent, you build trust.
Absolutely. Vulnerability and being honest and just telling it like it is, people are attracted to that.
Well, trust is a key factor in any business, any relationship. I mean,
Right.
with our customers here, it's all about trust and relationship. Right. I don't want them to find, if we have a problem product, I want to tell them. I don't want them to go find out somewhere else. I want to own it. I want to work with them and fix it. Right.
Yep.
So my team knows that I try to live, you always do the right thing. It doesn't matter how bad it's going to hurt, because that's the best way to build a relationship and build that trust. And It's worked. It's paid us dividends over and over and over.
Well, I mean, it's proof to the point that you've gone through all you've gone to, and you were still drawing the top echelon of people that wanted to invest. And I mean, I think that's another thing that you always got to remember. You can go through a horrific nightmare, but they can't take your brain. And if you can keep your brain ticking and your goal out there, I always call it the Zawantaneo out there of chipping through a wall for 19 years. How do you get that passion? That's what you've done, David, is every time that most people would have coiled up in a fetal position and just said, I give. And those were the times that you're most creative at getting to the next step.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to let somebody else knock me down.
Yeah.
I think, if I'm going to run my life, I have a family, I have an amazing wife, and I have great friends and investors. And my responsibility is to them to live my life and do the best I can. But I'm not going to let someone else decide whether I'm going to be successful or happy or not. That's
Right. You own that.
I own that. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What do you think, David, because you've lived quite a deal here. I mean, we could probably write a movie script and people go to this movie. What do you think's your biggest takeaway through all this?
Treat people the way you want to be treated. I've always, on top of that, I do love to help people.
Yeah.
I give without wanting something in return. I like to see people be successful. I mean, I've learned a lot. I've lived a lot. You've experienced what we have to go through to survive that.
Yeah.
And some people, the smallest things can cause their lives to be upside down. I want to help them overcome those things. And, I don't know, man. I just like to see people thrive.
Well, then, I mean, and you're in a position, David, where you've experienced all these things in your life. You know what's important in life. So reaching out and helping people thrive, you know what some of those ingredients are, which is a big deal.
Yeah. Again, I mean, like I said, I mean, what I think I learned a lot. I experienced things differently,
Yep.
I mean, the Department of Corrections, when I was there, they treated me, they helped me get through that. They really did go out of their way to make things as good as possible for me and my family. When my kids would come visit, they would let me use a conference room versus sit in the visiting room. I mean, they were really kind. They didn't have to be, but
right.
I also wasn't causing them a lot of trouble either.
Right.
So,
right.
I just learned a lot about people. I'm still not great judging everybody because I do like to give people the chance of being good.
Yeah.
For me, like I said, I just want to live a good life and help people. Yes. Do I want to make a ton of money? If that happens, that's great. I don't want to have to worry about money.
Right.
I want to make a ton of money for my investors and for my partners.
Yeah.
I like to help, but
that's almost like your scoreboard. You're playing the
it.
game. That's your scoreboard. If you're winning or losing, it's not the material part. It's if you're doing
not
good.
Anymore.
Yeah.
No, there's material things you can take away and you can get them back.
Yeah.
Friends, family, and health, you can't, right?
So, no. Doesn't do you any good to be the richest guy in the cemetery.
Yep. Exactly. 100%.
So if anybody wants to go, you go to goodplanetfoods.com, not .org.com. And they're everywhere. I mean, I've, you go to look up David and his company, they're everywhere. And it's so impressive, David, what you do. Anything else to you want to throw out there while we're.
No, I think, what's important is everybody can thrive and survive. You have to own who you are and determine what you want to do.
Yeah.
Do the right thing always. Don't expect something in return. It comes around. But give people
do it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and give people an opportunity because you never know what someone's going through. You can't judge them right out of the gate.
So true. One of the guys I had on was one of the second interviews on the podcast. Year one, as we're in year 3, is he said, "Don't take away hope because hope might be all they have, and that might be the thing that steps them through."
Yeah.
For those out there, I want to thank Homestead Financial here that helps me and lets me use this podcast room. I got all this fancy equipment, so it's nice. I appreciate it. So if you need any home mortgage needs, it's Greg Afdiev. He is your guy. Hey, if you're looking for a book out there, Nightmare Success, I've got one. It's on Amazon. Again, don't forget to follow, subscribe, share, leave a review on Apple. Those things really help out. I don't know what they do in that algorithm, but it does help. Go to BrentCassity.com. That's with a TY, not a DY. I spell it wrong. And as I used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. David, Israel, thank you so much for being here today. I love your story. Love what you're doing. Just if we could just clone you and keep a lot of Davids going, it would be fantastic.
That's what it takes. It takes a village, right? So
takes a village.
Thank you, Brent. It was really an honor to be on your show. Thank you very much.
Love it.
Sorry it took so much time.
Oh, it was perfect. Nightmare Success in and out.